going to set record, and we are recording. So let me go ahead and just share my screen. You guys can all see that? Can I get a thumbs up? Okay. So just kind of talking about the information that we're going to cover today. I have a lot of information to cover, and I want to be mindful of our time. So I'm going to kind of be talking a little bit fast and walking through. If you have questions, what I would encourage you to do, put them in the chat or save them till the end. I will, have, time saved at the end that we can go through those questions. If you have a question, don't hesitate to ask it, because chances are if you're thinking it, there's somebody else in the group who's thinking it as well. I'll hang out for a few minutes afterwards. If people just want to stick around and ask me specific questions, you can also email me, because that's a great way to get in touch with me as well. Okay. So what we're going to be covering today, I'm going to be introducing you guys to LSAT so that you can know all about that and what that all entails, how to start researching schools, a little bit of tips regarding that. We're going to talk about the LSAT because that's kind of first up in terms of all the application steps. I want to introduce you guys to some funding resources to help you through this process that you're going to be, that you're about to be undertaking. I've got some tips and hacks that I've just kind of, accumulated along the way. And I wrote that slide just thinking about the different topics that I usually find myself sharing with students throughout this whole application process. And then I know it can be overwhelming. So I just want to talk about, break it down into chunks and what are things that you can focus on now. First thing that I want to point out to you guys is the pre-law guide that's located in the Handshake Resource Library. A lot of the topics that we're going to be reviewing today are all there. So if I can really quickly, I want to just sort of hop over here to Handshake. Thumbs up. Are you guys seeing Handshake right now? Okay. So if we go to the Career Center, after you log into Handshake and go to the Career Center and then click on the resources section, there's a lot of resources in here. So I would just check this out in general. But if you go to the pre-law guide, then that's going to take you to this particular website that has a lot of information about what we're going to be covering today. So know that that's a resource that's there that I highly recommend that you guys go ahead and check out. So let me just get in here. Okay. Trying to get into the waiting room. All right, let me stop sharing my screen for just a minute. I've got 2 people in the waiting room. Okay. Okay, so just know that that's actually there for you guys to, to take a look at. So, all right. So these are the application components. I want you guys to know that what you're getting into. I mean, think of it as very similar to your undergrad applications. You've got the application itself to fill out, your transcripts, your letters from people who talk about how amazing you are, that standardized score, those essays that you're going to be writing. Essays are really important. There's very little interviews in the law school application process. So that's the personal part of your application. And then any addendums that you might be considering, that you might consider writing. With regard to the addendums, if you think that you want to write an explanation addendum for grades, for an LSAT score, et cetera, let's chat about that. If you think that you have a character and fitness addendum to write, let's also chat about that. That is something that you are going to have to attend to, whether it was an academic, whether it was on campus. Don't sweat it. I always say, if every student who, had an infraction in the residence hall or had an infraction for underage drinking on campus didn't get into law schools, no students will be getting into law school. So, but it is something that you're going to disclose, and we can kind of, talk through that. You'll notice the LSAT and the GRE, there are more law schools that are actually accepting the GRE as their standardized test. Every year, that list of law schools grows. Duke, Wake Forest, Chapel Hill, for example, are on that list. So if you are thinking that perhaps another graduate program might be down the road, that might be something to consider. It streamlines the amount of, graduate record or standardized tests, that you have to take. Just know that once you take the LSAT, you're an LSAT applicant. It's not like you can, well, let me see, take the LSAT, and if I don't do well on that, then I'll take the GRE. You need to make the decision on which one you want to go with, but know that that's an option. And as for those who are just joining, and I see some people already doing so, go ahead and submit any questions that you might have in the chat or save them for later. I'll allow time at the end that we can go ahead and address those questions that you have. So I want to talk about LSAT. You'll notice there's a lot of acronyms in this whole process. We have LSAC, we have LSAT, we have CAS. I'm going to get into that, the CRS, the LORs. I think for fun, we'll have, a quiz at some point to see like whoever can name, what the acronyms stand for wins a prize or something. But LSAC is going to be your centralized hub for everything, taking place with regard to your law school application process. So I'm going to go ahead and again, I'm going to share my screen and let me just move through here. Okay. So here we have Law School Admissions Council. Everything from taking the LSAT. So when you do eventually register to take that, first LSAT exam, that is all done through here. And all of the information that they have relating for how you prepare for it, how you take it, how it's scored. How do you go about choosing particular law schools? There's a lot of fantastic information in here related to, how can you go about choosing law schools? This official guide to, ABA approved law schools, I go through this with every particular student that I meet with, because it's a fantastic resource to help you get started when it comes to determining what are your reach, your competitive, and your safety schools. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. The whole process of applying to law schools. The steps to apply are right here. Information about the Credential Assembly Service. There's an infographic that you could, download here and just keep track of as you go. So there's a lot of good information here. Any events that they might have. They have tons of events related to law school, fairs, financial aid information events, a lot of different events that you can check out here. I also like to point out, I will say that this search box is probably one of the best search engines that I've seen on a particular website. When you go to a website, you search it and it takes you to some blog entry from 2015. This is an excellent, you can see all the different searches that I do, that it takes you pretty much to whatever information that you're looking for. So know that it's, it's a pretty good resource. That's a pretty helpful way of searching for things here. Okay, so I'm going to go back to, and I appreciate you guys being flexible as we're kind of going through. Credential Assembly Service. I'm starting to get a lot of questions about this. What is this? Do I have to do this? Why do I have to do this? Credential Assembly Service, or CAS, show of hands or whatever you're thinking, if you utilized Common App whenever you were applying to your undergraduate institutions, CAS is the Common App for law schools. It serves as kind of like the one-stop shop for where many of your application materials are going to be filed and are going to be sent to the particular schools that you are applying to. You can see down below what it includes. You only have to send one transcript to CAS or to LSAC as part of your CAS to have that transcript sent out to the different law schools that you are applying for. Your letters of recommendation are all processed through Credential Assembly Service. Your letter writers write one letter of recommendation. Those letters of recommendation are housed in your CAS account. And then when you are filling out the applications, you select which letters of recommendation you want to go to the particular schools you're applying for. The actual applications that you'll be filling out. So yes, in addition to registering for a Credential Assembly Service, in addition to creating your LSAC account, you're going to be, submitting an application, kind of the nuts and bolts, the biography information about you for each law school that you apply to. And you do all of that electronic processing through Credential Assembly Service. Finally, Credential Assembly Service generates a law school report for you. This is a standardized report that law schools receive with your applications that helps streamline and summarize information that they're looking for. So they will see your Davidson transcript, but they will also see your Davidson information on this law school report. They will see the standardized GPA that LSAC calculates for you. They will see any LSAT, the exam, any activity that you have with regards to the exam, exams that you've completed and have a score for, exams that you might be registered for, upcoming exams, exams that you've canceled, etc. It's really a streamlined way for the law schools to quickly and concisely be able to, compare apples to apples. Because a Davidson transcript looks very different than a Middlebury transcript, which looks very different than a Wake Forest transcript. So this law school report is, provided to assist them. Those law school reports, again, that costs a fee. So there is a $195 fee to subscribe to the Credential Assembly Service and create that account for yourself. That remains active for 5 years. And then for every law school that you apply to, you need to submit a law school report or have a law school report sent. And that is $45 for each one of those reports. So now you can see why I'm excited to talk to you guys about funding opportunities when we get to the end. Because this process, everyone says law school is expensive, and I'm always like, yes, it is. And the expense doesn't start with the tuition. It actually starts with the application process itself. But don't let that shy you away. All right. So I want to talk briefly about, researching law schools. This is about the time when students start coming and asking me, like, how do I find what law schools I want to go to? What do I do? How do I find them? Like, what should I be looking at, et cetera, et cetera. So, you have the numbers portion of your application and you have everything else. And so, yes, the GPA and the LSAT are the numbers portion. And I'll hear from students, they only look at the GPA and the LSAT, right? And the answer is wrong. They don't only look at that. But the reality is that a lot of people apply for law school. And so they use that GPA and that LSAT to help, determine which ones are we really wanting to consider, which ones do we need to give either more attention to in terms of looking at their application, or we know from their GPA and their LSAT that they would be a good fit academically for our school. And so that's why I wrote there actually in that second box that the GPA and the LSAT are going to help you determine what might be your dream schools, what might be your competitive schools, and what might be schools that are going to be safety schools for you. Davidson students on average apply to about 6 to 8 schools. Some apply to less, some apply to a little more. When I'm talking to students who are applying to, double digit 12, 15, 20 schools, let's have a conversation about that to talk about that process and what you're thinking, because I think there's a way that you can streamline that to make it a little bit more manageable for you economically and, mentally. That's a lot to go through. Don't rule out schools based on your GPA and your LSAT. But what I strongly recommend is, and this is the step that students oftentimes skip, is what I first want you to do is I want you to determine what's important to you whenever you are thinking about a law school that you might want to attend. I want you to think about things like the location. Do you have an interest in the Southeast? Have you always wanted to go to the Pacific Northwest? What geographic location do you think you might be living in, at least those few years outside of law school? Because while you don't have to pick the specific state that you want to practice law in, it definitely does benefit to look at a particular geographic region. So if you think that you might like to stay living at least for a few years after law school in this Southeast region, then perhaps you would be looking at law schools in North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Florida. If you think that you're going to be working someday in the Pacific Northwest and someday might come sooner rather than later, then perhaps you might be looking at schools out in that area. So think about the location, think about cost, think about the size of the school. Do you want a large school now that you've experienced a small school for 4 years? You want something different? Or do you want to, attend a small school because you really enjoyed that particular atmosphere? What type of setting are you looking for? I always use the example of Elon College of Law and Wake Forest College of Law, both excellent law schools that are located in North Carolina. If you haven't been to Wake Forest's campus, Wake Forest's campus is a lot like Davidson. I kind of say it's Davidson on steroids because it's bigger, and but it's got the green and the grasses and the academic buildings, and and the law school is located right on that particular campus. Elon law schools is a building that is located in downtown Greensboro, so it is not near Elon College's campus. So you want to think about, what is it that I might be interested in doing? A lot of students who go to Elon like it because it's located in downtown Greensboro, right next to the courthouse, so it's very purposeful. So think about those types of things. Think about the resources that you want to have access to, what type of support you might need, either in general or maybe to specific circumstances that you have. Look at a school's outcomes. Where do most of their graduates attend as far as internships, while they're in law school, and then opportunities after they graduate. So what you want to do is you want to make a list of things that are important to you, because that list is going to be very personal, and those are things that you definitely want to be thinking about. And then you can see all of the different resources that you have here for looking at and for researching particular schools. Ones that I like to point out from this list, and again, a lot of this information is in that pre-law guide and the researching law schools section. LSAC has that great resource that I talked about, where once you have a GPA and you have an LSAT, either a practice exam or that first exam scored, you can plug those into that particular site, and it'll generate a list for you of all of the schools based on your GPA and your LSAT, what your likelihood is for admission. So that's a great resource to start. But then when you are starting to see law school specific events, fingers crossed, we can actually have you guys visiting campuses this summer and this fall, which is something that people haven't been able to do for 2 years. Take advantage of that. The law school forums, or the events that I talked about that LSAC offers starting in the fall, in person as well as virtual. These are law school fairs that take place where law schools from across the country will set up shop, with a table or a chat room to be able to talk with you about their school. We usually host or, co-host the law school fair every November. That's a great way as well. I always encourage talking to alums. We have many different alums who are going to a variety of different schools to talk about their particular experience, either the schools they applied to, the school that they're attending, and how they made that decision. And I also want to give a plug for LSAC, their candidate referral service. So again, another acronym, CRS. Basically, this is a service that you can sign up for where, any law schools that utilize CRS will send out information to law school applicants who have applied for that particular service. It's a great way to get information about schools that you might otherwise not have heard about. And so I've talked with many students who have found out about particular opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise know about if they hadn't used that particular service. Okay, so you can start doing some research now. Doesn't have to be top priority, but can certainly start. Okay, but speaking of top priorities, that's a great segue into what your top priority should be, is focusing on the LSAT. So if you're applying in the fall and you haven't started thinking about it, it's time to start thinking about it. It's time to start thinking about how you're going to be preparing for it. It is recommended. The question that I get is, how much do I have to study for the LSAT? In general, it's recommended for a period of 3 months, 15 to 20 hours a week, whether that is, and that's total. So that can be in conjunction with a class that you might be taking, a prep course, that can be independent study on your own. But greatest chance for success, research has shown that 15 to 20 hours per week over the course of 3 months leading up to that exam. Scores remain good for 5 years. So if you take the exam now and something amazing comes along and you find yourself, I'm not going to be applying in the fall, or, I'm doing something different, you have that score on file for 5 years. You don't have to take it again if you find yourself applying within that time frame. And law schools really don't have a preference versus old or new LSAT scores. So you can see the format of it if you're not already aware. You've got the multiple choice exam, and then you've got the LSAT writing. So multiple choice exam is, there's 3 scored sections. Logical reasoning, that's the one that people either really love or really kind of struggle with. Analytical reasoning and reading comprehension. Then they're also going to throw in an unscored section in there because that's how they like to test their new questions. You then have the LSAT writing, okay? They've changed it a little bit. The writing is no longer, you know, you sit there, if you recall like your SAT or your ACT days, and I don't know now if they even have writing, that, you know, you had to do it all in one day, right? You had to sit there, take the multiple choice, and then it was like, okay, like get out your pens and pencils or whatever, and it's time to write. It's not like that anymore. They changed it as of last year, where number one, the writing sample is now done electronically. So I think that warrants them paying a little bit more attention to it. Number two, you don't take it the day of the exam. It is something that you take, you know, at a time of your choosing. So you have, you know, the opportunity to choose when you'd like to sit down and take it. But what's important to remember is that a complete writing section has to be on file in order for your scores to be able to release to the law schools. So law schools need you to have a complete LSAT on file before they send them out. They don't consider an LSAT complete until they actually have that writing section from you. So what I like to say is, you know, the mindset is when you start to prepare for the exam, and we'll kind of get into, you know, some tips in a little bit, think about yourself as you have enrolled in another course for whatever semester you're thinking. If it's now, if it's over the, you know, into the late spring and early summer, you've enrolled in a course, LSAT 101. And you're going to be focused in terms of if that course is offered on Monday, Wednesday, Friday from 10 to noon, because that's when you don't have a Davidson class, or that's when you have some free time. That's when your course is, right? I want to point out another opportunity that LSAC is now offering as of last year in response to a lot of students mentioning it. They now have the option for a first-time test taker to do a preview. So before, and if you remember, this was like this with your SATs and your ACTs, right? Like you took the exam and you had to just kind of have a feel for, how do I think I did on the exam? Should I keep that score? Should I cancel that score? Now for first-time test takers, LSAT offers the opportunity for you to review or preview your score before you decide if you want to cancel or keep that particular score. Like everything, there's a fee that you have to pay in order to do that. It's $45 if you sign up prior to the test. It's $75 if you sign up within 2 days after the test. And so basically it allows you to see your score before you decide if you want to, you know, to cancel it or keep it. Another question I get is, well, you know, if it says cancel on my law school report, is that bad? No. Law schools don't have time to think about why a person canceled an exam, because they could be canceling it, because they could be canceling it for so many different reasons. Sorry about that, guys. Okay. So here we have the testing cycle coming up for 22-23. Your target is to be looking at taking the exam in either June or August. Scores you can see, so even right now, like you don't take the exam on a particular day. When it's offered in, you know, whatever month it's offered in, you know, some months you can see with August, they're only actually offering it. There's some months they're only actually offering it, looks like on one day, but it looks like in June, they're offering it over a couple of different days. So you take the exam electronically, we'll talk about that, and you receive your scores within a couple of weeks after taking that particular exam. So you want to target the June or the August exam. If you either are targeting that and it's not going well and your prep isn't going well and you're not feeling confident, you can take the September or the October exam. It's not too late. If you take a June or an August exam and you keep your score and then you come out of it and you see that score and you're like, oh, hell no, I can do better than this, or I'm not sure what happened, you can go ahead and you can take the September or the October exam. You are not penalized for taking an exam more than one time. It's become pretty commonplace that students do take the exam more than one time. If you take it one time and you get the score that you want and you hit it out of the park, don't take it more than that. But know that it's an option, that if you do need to take it into September and October, you can do so. That's when you're going to be filing your applications, but you want to take the exam when you feel most confident in your abilities. And so if you're either waiting for these fall exam dates or you're taking it and then in the summer and taking it again, that's fine. These are tips that I recommend based on conversations that I've had with students. So, you want to have consistent studying over the course of a few months. You want to determine what works best for you. This is a question I hear all the time. What's the best way to study for the test? I don't know, because I'm not you. You need to decide, is it, can I benefit from, being able to study independently on my own? Or would I benefit from having a structured course? Would I benefit from, having a structured course that is self-paced? Or would I benefit from having a structured course that I know meets every Saturday from 2 to 5 for a course of, a few months? You need to determine what works best for you. The LSAT is in now a digital format. When COVID hit, because testing centers couldn't be open, what LSAC did to circumvent that was people took their test wherever it was that they were. So you did have people who were taking tests in public libraries if they were open. You had people who were taking tests in their bedrooms, in their houses or their apartments. You had people taking tests wherever they could find the best Wi-Fi. But what they did find is that overall, that operation actually worked pretty well. For the most part. And in this era of this kind of wishy-washy in terms of what COVID is going to be looking like, they are still continuing with that format, that you will sign up to take the LSAT on that particular day in that month. And then rather than going to a testing center, at least for right now, you're going to be setting up shop wherever you think that you can take the test in the best environment for you. What I encourage you to do is to take a practice digital test in that simulated environment before you actually take the exam itself. I hear from many students, especially those who have gone out and bought big old books, which is great to help you study. And they go through and they're working through the tests and circling things in the books and highlighting, that then all of a sudden they get into that test environment where they've got those hours where it's just them and their laptop and some scratch paper, but you need to get used to being able to take it where you are highlighting using a mouse, where you are using your laptop to scroll through things. And I know that you guys do this on a daily basis, but with the added stress, many students have said that it just kind of threw off their game. It kind of threw off their pace because it wasn't what they were used to. So I strongly encourage that. Here's some resources that you can use in terms of, how to prepare for the exam. If you're not aware, Davidson has partnered with Kaplan Testing Services to offer their LSAT prep course at a discounted rate for Davidson students. It is 40% discount. It is still expensive, but it is, at 40% less than it would be otherwise. You can find information about this in Handshake. If you actually look in the events section, because that's the only way Handshake will let me list it, you can actually, search Kaplan and the information will come up. Know that that's not an endorsement of Kaplan on our part. That's just that we recognize that that's one outlet that students use, and it's a partnership that Kaplan pursued with us, so we wanted to make that available. These other test prep courses or test prep companies that are listed here are all ones that Davidson students have used and have indicated have been very helpful and very successful. I have also heard, when you look at number 5, Khan Academy, that is actually a partnership that Khan Academy has with LSAC, where they are offering a free LSAT, like a prep course, tutoring programs, etc. Through Khan Academy. I've heard many students have utilized that. And then I also like to point out, LSAT Prep and LSAT Prep Plus. The difference being LSAT Prep is free, LSAT Prep Plus is a $99 fee, but you have that for a year. where with each of them, you are given, a practice test, you are given resources, actual exams that you can be utilizing in that simulated environment that I was talking about. With the Prep Plus, you have the opportunity just for access to more resources. All right. How am I going to pay for all of this? So these are resources that I like to recommend to people. Ask LSAC for a fee waiver. So I'll say it again, ask LSAC for a fee waiver. This is it's a waiver that can set you up for a lot of different opportunities. It is not a guarantee that you're going to receive it. There is a tiered system with different benefits for each, depending on what financial status you might be presenting. The worst that can happen is they say no, and you're none the worse. It is not like, students have asked, does it go on my record? Does that look badly? The answer is no to both of those. You are simply asking for a fee waiver. When you apply for a fee waiver, and if you are granted a fee waiver, then that allows you to waive or reduce application fees that are associated with LSAC, like your LSAT exam, like the credential assembly service fee, like your law school report fees, etc. Also, if you are granted a fee waiver, many schools, for that application that you have to fill out for each school, which can range anywhere from $60 to $100, people who receive LSAC fee waivers are also granted application fees waived for each of the schools that they apply to. So I just encourage you to consider applying, because the worst that can happen is they say no. The best that can happen is they say yes, and that can save you money. I also want to point out a new particular resource that the Matthews Center has just is in the process of developing this semester, professional development funding. In each of your academic years, students can apply for $1,000 towards professional development funding. For law school applications, that could be to help cover the course of an LSAT prep course. You also can apply for funding for $250 towards your postgraduate application fees. So that could include the fee for registering for the credential assembly service, some of your application fees, etc. You can find more information about this, including the application process, again in the resource section of Handshake. Search professional development funding, and it will talk about the process and has the form there that you can fill out. This is for current students who are in good standing, for current students who are at Davidson through financial aid or through scholarship, okay? So these are funding resources that I want you guys to be aware of. Okay, I know I'm about 7 minutes over time, so I want to leave some time for questions. So these are tips and hacks. So I'm not going to go through all of these, but these again are the things that I've talked about and had conversations with and mentioned with students, time and time again. I talked about signing up for the credential referral service, and so I definitely encourage that. Talked about the importance of completing at least one, possibly more practice exams for the LSAT in the actual environment that you're going to be taking it in. I want you guys to know that law schools operate on rolling admissions. There's no opening day. It's not like September 1st is opening day for all of the law schools, but most of them tend to open between beginning to mid-September and beginning to mid-October. And they start reviewing applications as soon as those applications are received. Having said that, it's important for you to, because people will ask me, when's the best time to file my application? It's going to be competitive. COVID made it more competitive, and this past year was still competitive, and we just don't know. We think that we're seeing that trend might continue. Having said that, so that's why filing applications early can be beneficial, but you want to file an application when you feel you've had the time to put in the effort to put forward your best application. There's no point in getting an application in mid to end September if having it in October, by having those extra couple of weeks, allows you to put more time into that application and make yourself a more standout applicant. So take your time whenever you're putting together your application. I have some thoughts about rankings. Use them cautiously. Rankings can help you see perhaps what top schools are. But what I like to point out with the rankings is, number one, the ranking criteria is determined by other people. So there's basically a group of people who get together and they determine what are the things that people should be looking at, that everyone should look at when it comes to determining what the best law school is. And then they rank schools according to that particular criteria. Your criteria, when I was talking about make up a list of what's important to you, may be very different. Number two, that criteria hasn't changed in decades. So I already know, everybody gets all excited. US News and World Report, the rankings are out, the rankings are out. I don't even need to look at the rankings. I know what schools are going to be in the top 10. I know what schools are going to be in the top 20. It may jump, from 10 to 15 or from 15 to 20 or 17 to 13. But the criteria that they use hasn't changed enough. So when I hear students talking about, I want to get into the best law school, it's important for you to think about what's going to be the best law school for you. And those are conversations that we can have one-on-one when we're working together. Don't be afraid to ask the admissions representatives questions. There's an urban legend out there that there's some list at all of these admission schools that when you call and ask questions, they write down the ticker. And every time you ask a question, they make a mark. And when you've hit like, well, you know what, Skylar, you asked 5 questions. That's 4 questions too many. You're out. They want to hear from you. They want you to be able to make the best decision for you. They want you to have the information to know, is this the school that's right for me to apply to? So whether you're meeting them in the law school forums or the law school fairs, whether you are, on tours, whether you have the opportunity to have a one-on-one, or whether you just want to email or phone call, don't call them just for the sake of asking a question. Call them if you have a particular question that you feel, I need this information in order to help make a decision about my application, in order to help, complete a section of my application. Don't be afraid to ask them. And my overall tip is follow the law school's directions. Every law school is different. What I mean by that is, as an example with letters of recommendation, many law schools want you to have, especially when you are going to be applying right out of undergrad, at least a couple of your particular letters of recommendation coming from faculty. Some law schools make that a requirement. Some law schools highly encourage that. There are going to be some law schools that will give prompts for essays. There will be others that will not give any prompts. Follow each school's directions in terms of their applications. Okay. Finally, what do we focus on now? What do we do in summer? How do you work with me? Your current focus, finish your junior year strong, all right? This is the last semester of grades that they're going to be receiving, except for those law schools that you're waitlisted at next fall, and you'll have the opportunity to send your fall semester senior year, the grades to them. Study for your LSAT. Secure your letter of recommendation writers. So, think about who it is that you would like to be asking in the fall and approach them this semester before the semester is over to see their willingness and ability to write a letter for you and to find out what their fall plans are. Are they going to be on sabbatical? Are they going to be doing something different? Where is it that you can reach them? Confirm your summer plans, whether that's, working, studying for the LSAT, doing an internship. Those are things that you can be focusing on now. The summer is the time to study and, for and take the LSAT. Start researching and visiting schools and start working on your personal statement and your other essays. They don't have to be polished when you come back for the fall semester, but start generating some ideas. Working with me, we schedule and we work together as you need. It's not required that you meet with me. It's not like pre-med. Pre-med, you have required meetings that you have to have with the advisor. There's a required committee that you need to be working with. I'm here to help you guys at whatever step along the way to provide you support through this application process. And you can do that, by scheduling there's pre-law appointment types in Handshake. There's general and there's active applicants. So schedule the active applicant. And know that we can start meeting in the summer months. I'll be here on campus. If you're around, we can certainly be doing that, meeting together. We can also meet by Zoom. I also want to give a plug for, and I'm going to stop sharing my screen because that's the end of that amazing PowerPoint. If you're not aware, tonight at 8 o'clock, the Prelaw Society is hosting a program, What to Expect in Law School. It's a virtual program that starts at 8. We've got, I think, 3 or 4, Anya's not here anymore, 3 or 4 Davidson alums who are in anywhere between their first and third year of law school, who are going to be talking about their experience. So they're going to be talking about the application process, what they wish they knew that they now know. They're going to be talking about that first year in law school, what's it really like, all sorts of different topics. So if you go to Handshake in the events section and just type in, what to expect in law school, it'll have all the information, including the Zoom link. Okay. Let me go ahead and I'm going to take a look at just the chat. Can you read okay, so Abby, you've got a couple of different questions, and Abby's still here. Can you read your letter of recommendation letters in CAS, or are they private? You definitely want them to be private. What's going to happen, how that process works is you're going to enter in your credential assembly, in your CAS file, you're going to enter the name and the contact information, the email address for your letter writers. And then there's a form that LSAC is going to send to your letter writers that they either fill out, or a lot of times what they'll do is they'll fill out general information on that form and they'll attach that letter, as a document to that form. And that form is sent back to LSAC to be housed as part of your account. So it keeps the integrity. This sounds very lofty. It keeps the integrity of the letters of recommendation intact. Basically, if you're asking somebody to be a letter writer, number one, ask them if they feel confident they can write you a strong letter of recommendation. And I want you to use that descriptive, because writing a letter of recommendation can be very general and can be neutral. And a neutral letter isn't going to be able to provide more feedback or more information about you. Number two, you can help your letter writers prior. So if you select somebody who you'd like to write a letter of recommendation, a strong letter of recommendation for you, and they agree, how you can help them is send them supporting documents. You could send them a copy of your resume. You could send them, a statement that talks about why you have this interest in law school. Doesn't have to be your personal statement that's polished and ready to go, but just kind of outlining to them why you have this interest. You can also send them, thoughts about why you chose them. If you had that particular professor for a course, and either the content that was discussed, or the project that you worked on in that class, or the paper that was written, you felt really had allowed you the opportunity to develop your writing skills, your research skills, et cetera, and you're hoping that they might be able to speak to that. That's not telling them what to write, that's assisting them, and they'll appreciate that. Yes, so next question, the LSAT writing section is timed. I believe that it's 30 minutes. Okay, and there's all sorts of information on LSAC about the actual writing section as well. Not sure, okay, Jack, what are you asking me? Not sure if this is in the scope of this call, but are there any definitive negatives to taking the LSAT and beginning to research this year, but applying to schools next year? No, there's no negative to that at all, Jack. I think if you didn't hear me say, your LSAT scores are good for 5 years. So if you're feeling, I've talked to many students who have said I'm still kind of in student mode, and I feel like, I would do better because I am kind of in student mode, as opposed to going and working for, a year and then trying to work and come home and study in the evening, et cetera. So you can definitely do that. And then still have that on file if you're going to be deciding to take a bridge year or 2 and then go back and utilize that particular exam. Okay. I think, Sydney, that tonight's program is going to be recorded. I will make the recommendation to AK, who's the president, that it is recorded, and then we'll see a way that we can, if you've registered for it, I think that it's something, that's what I usually do, is I'll send out a recording to everybody who registered, or maybe we can put it up on the Matthews Center YouTube. Skylar, do I recommend the LSAT or the GRE? I don't know. I mean, it really, it's not a matter of like which test is better or which test is viewed more favorably or another. Myself personally, I like the GRE, like you're going to have math, and so for me, like you can tell my reaction to math. I mean, I took the GRE like, 2 years after I graduated from undergrad, and I'm like, I have to know calculus. Like I haven't had calculus since high school. So for me, I feel like that the LSAT would be, it would work best for me because it's not subject matter based. If you're, there aren't schools that are going to say, we view the LSAT better than we do the GRE. Duke took GRE applicants. Duke took LSAT applicants. They don't view one as, more favorably or unfavorably as another. So I think that's more kind of like, what your thought is about it. And we can, we can talk about that, kind of in more detail, sort of one-on-one. I think either is appropriate. I think it's just, I had one student who said, she just really preferred the format of the GRE. Now that was at the time when the GRE was offered multiple times. And the GRE was, electronic or digital. Well, now LSAT has sort of come on board with that. So that particular reason is kind of shoved aside. I think it just really depends on, sort of what your strategy is. I think with the LSAT, if you take the time, I mean, the point of, preparing for the LSAT is to prepare for how to take the test, right? Like the logic games is probably the one that's the most like, I don't really know how to do this, but the reading comprehension and the analytical, like we know how to do that. So it's a matter of like, how do you prepare to most effectively take the test? Whereas with the GRE, there might be some subject material that you're going to have to brush up on as well. I'm not sure. Okay. Anyone else have any questions that maybe I haven't covered or questions that you've thought of? Okay. Well, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop recording in just a minute. I'm looking forward to working with all of you. It's fun and it's stressful and it's fun, but know that you have the support. Know that you have been a Davidson student, so know that you've got this, okay? So I'll look forward to hearing from you by email. I'll look forward to seeing you on my schedule. I'll stick around if anybody wants to stick around after, I've recorded, hit, press stop. And if you want to ask some particular questions, we can do that as well. So I hope you guys have a good evening.